Have you had an argument with someone recently, or just a distressful or uncomfortable kind of situation where you reacted differently than you wanted to react, and maybe another person reacted differently than you hoped they would? Do you think that that situation is only related to the person that is involved, specifically in that current situation that you just had recently? I'm going to say something really bold, and maybe you've heard this before, but I'm willing to bet that whatever is happening in your current situation, whatever that kind of friction or tension or whatever that is rooted in your past experiences, and specifically from childhood. And I'll even go so far as to say your very first experiences with whoever your first caregivers were, that it's related to that. And I think this is important for us to think about, because a lot of us, and this is what I see in a lot of clients and a lot of patients over the many, many years that I've worked in like the mental health and life enhancement kind of field, is that people really want to get the next quick fix, the next modality, the next brain technology, the next medication, this one particular thing that they think is going to solve all the problems and get them everything that they ever wanted. And what I see happen over and over again is they dance around the idea that there are deeper roots to why they're reacting the way they are, why they have blocks the way they do. But until they are willing to go into those deeper layers, I often don't really see much change. And in my own life and the processes I've gone through, especially recently, where I really, really started to make connections with why I was reacting the way I was, which is generally an overreaction to something. As I started to make connections with how deeply they were rooted in my first experiences, in my childhood experiences, I just kind of kept repeating a lot of it. They were staying stuck in cycles. They would be at bay for a while and then they'd emerge again. And once I made that shift of really going into these deeper connections, I have now been able pretty consistently for a while to stay very steady. I'm using this kind of motion to indicate that, but very aligned, very steady in the face of the exact same people, circumstances, situations, conversations that used to throw me off, that used to make me feel very stressed out, anxious, reactive, defensive, all that kind of thing. I'm able to stay centered and grounded and still compassionate, but with a sense of steadiness and boundaries for myself. And so that's part of what I want to continue to share, and a really big piece of how I have also helped other people get to that place, or at least it's still not a golden ticket, but it's a new level of awareness that just helps create new possibilities for new trajectories to occur. And that level of awareness always has a connection to childhood. 100% of the time when I have had a session or conversation with somebody and they have had a massive revelation, huge connecting of dots, and a huge shift in how they see themselves, see the situation, to the point where the feedback is verbally them saying, this just changed my life. My life feels like I now know everything's going to be okay. Comments like that occur when this very deep connection between childhood stuff, experiences, and very kind of specific ones, nerves in a sense that I call them, that get hit, and what's happening now. So what is happening now is actually this beautiful clue, beautiful gateway into revealing those deeper layers, so that we can then start to make sense of it, and it starts to connect. And I just have this little diagram. This is abstract art. This is not anatomically accurate by any means, but there are different levels of the cortex that do kind of different, there's different networks in a sense that have different functions. I'm just going to take this from a very abstract way of looking at it, but there are areas of our brain, or networks, that deal with receiving signals. There are networks related to the processing, and then there's networks related to the transmitting of, in a sense, the directions of what to do with the information that was processed. What is key here is that two really important things. One is that even the signals that are being received inside the meat of the skull, where that's coming, is still coming through. Here's the body, here's the flesh of the body and all the skin and the visceral layers of that, all the receptors, the sensory receptors and in the retina and the ear, all that kind of stuff. So first of all, there's already a filter. There's already something that is going to filter what is received. And those filters are still experience-based. They're based on our past and what has the different thresholds that have built up over time. But secondly, even in terms of the processing can't really occur without these past models and algorithms in there. That is what learning and memory is, and we could not function without the past playing a role in how we do things now. Otherwise, I would not be able to know how to do anything. It would never be retained, right? So in order for processing to happen, it's building off of what has already occurred and the associations that are built, the networks that were already built. So it's a continuous process of creating newer and newer circuits that integrate what has already happened. You can't really delete the past. So because of that, because we need to know that the brain is processing what it's receiving through these connections with stuff that's happened in the past, we have to understand that what we feel like we're just thinking or reacting right now has to go through this kind of algorithm and these calculations that have accumulated over time. And so what I find is that and we're going to continue to go through this over the videos, especially the next one, I am going to talk about this more. But if we can get to, and I'm going to take you through a process in the next video, but get to some of this awareness of the fact that what is happening now is related to stuff that happened in childhood. It opens up three kind of new possibilities. And one of them is that by understanding that the fight that you just had, or the reaction you just had, or the deep sense of rejection, or whatever that is, when you can see that it's actually not so much about only what is happening right now, and more about deeply embedded programs and physiological kind of patterns and sensations and all that kind of stuff from when you were very, very little and very helpless and very dependent on the other people, to the point where anything that was socially related when you were that little was life-threatening to a certain extent. When you can see that what your reaction is now and what the situation is now is very intertwined with that, you can then allow for this situation to be less life-threatening or seemingly life-threatening, seemingly less dangerous. What that does is that also, because you are able to then see that how you're reacting to somebody, how you're feeling and experiencing this has so many roots in things that happened when you were little, you also become more self-understanding. And you have more empathy for yourself. And that often translates into empathy for the other person, because you also see that your reaction may have been disproportionate to what was happening. So you see how what they received from you may have been not connected so much to right now and more connected to stuff that you have from your past. So it also creates some more kind of empathy and understanding for the other person. And then the third thing, which I've already kind of touched on, is it adds the dimension of awareness. So when you add this dimension of awareness, and what I mean by that is if we don't have it, it's basically stuff happens and then we react. It's just this automatic thing where there's no level of consciousness. It's just very repetitive and automated. When we add the dimension of awareness where there's like, oh, how did this connect, or where did this come from? It creates new choice points. So right in between the kind of signaling and the different sensations that you get, and I'm going to go more into that, between that and how the next behavior happens, when you add the dimension of awareness, which comes from seeing how the different roots and the different layers are kind of added to this processing. By understanding that, you create just another point to choose from, instead of the unconscious where there's no choice, in a sense, it just loops around and around and around. You've now almost put a little halt in it, and you now can still sink back into that unconscious, kind of reaction if it's very overwhelming. But they're generally, when you're able to practice this, adding this dimension of awareness, you now have a choice point of saying, I'm going to try this. And it's still trial and error. It doesn't mean you have the automatic perfect solution every time, but you've added a new possibility into your kind of future trajectory. So in the next video, I'm going to go a little bit more into how we get into these deeper layers. But just take with you as a reflection for this one that whatever is happening now, there is a very, very, very good chance that it is touching on a nerve that comes from when you were really little. And we'll look a little more deeply into that in the next video. Thank you.